inside a closed place full of lava and dangerous things. The rank has Explorer at level 8,150. Namaki Haruka was running. His stats are all ranked S. As he was heading towards dozens of monsters gathered on the battlefield, he drew his sword and attacked the monsters at once, killing several of them simultaneously, and spotting a large dragon appearing in the distance. At that moment, he shouted for support, and a girl agreed to leave those things in her hands. She launched a water serpent attack at the opponents, causing even more destruction. Namiki thanked her, and she replied that it was an easy task. A notification warned of an approaching advanced monster from the sky to the left, and he quickly defended himself and killed it. The same happened from the other sides. Namiki continued killing the monsters as notifications appeared about them. Suddenly someone shouted that he was slow. Another person appeared to defend Namiki from the attack. The swordswoman told him to leave that one to her, so he could keep moving forward. He agreed and left things to her before continuing to run. When he looked over his shoulder, Namiki remembered that he admired that woman and became an explorer. The world he was living in now was Dungeon Street, ever since he was old enough to understand. There were many adults around him known as explorers. The city was being supported daily by these explorers. The explorers faced fierce monsters and traps placed in their path. While exploring the dungeons, they gathered together. The explorers received requests directly from the Explorer Association. Subjugating monsters inside the dungeon allowed people to collect and trade acquired items. Creating maps for the dungeon was also permitted, as well as making long journeys and getting even closer to more achievements. In this world, they dedicated themselves day and night to conquering dungeons. If the explorer rank certified by the association increased, gaining fame and wealth was nothing but a dream. And so we entered the story inside the dungeon on the first floor. At the time, Amiki was just a beginner explorer. To increase the explorer rank, it was necessary to demonstrate great contributions. Above all, high stats were also needed. Defeating monsters would allow him to level up. At that time, Amiki was at level 100 and was a rank D. Explorer stats were increased through the use of skills and magic. As well, if he worked diligently to accumulate achievements, he would eventually succeed. His explorer rank would increase even more, or so Namiki hoped at the beginning. In general, his stats were ranked D, and he focused on the water element. At the moment, Namiki felt that he was lamenting and couldn't afford to waste his time. He decided to move forward to continue his work and used his special skill called calibration and measurement. This allowed him to scan within a radius of 30 meters. Geology was normal and the structure of his surroundings was adequate. The magical power content had a medium range. Namiki noticed that some parts seemed abnormally fragile. With this scale, he thought he could handle things alone, disarm traps, or repair the ground in lower levels. 4 high-rank explorers. It was just a simple task that they didn't even need to bother with. But even in a job like this, where the other explorers looked at Namiki and laughed at him, he certainly thought he could be of help to someone. In the slums of Dungeon Street, the protagonist remembered walking around, crying when he was still a child, asking if everything was really okay. He didn't understand because helping someone like him, who was from the slums, couldn't bring any benefit. The girl turned and said that wasn't true. If he ever wanted to help someone in return, then he would understand how colorful the view of this kind action was. Namaki was motivated by Himawari. If it weren't for her, he would never have come this far, and he wondered if she would recognize him as he was now. While reflecting on his past, a boy accompanied by 2 other girls approached Namaki with a laugh. He laughed because he was the first to reach level 100. He must really be some kind of chosen one. And the girls commented about him being the boy from the rumors. Shinji agreed with the question and let them check, using their appraisal revealing that Namiki was indeed at level 100. Meanwhile, Yukimura Shinji was at level 45, but he was still a rank explorer. The girl laughed when she saw that he really was level 100, but in the end he was a total weakling. Even someone of rank B, like her, could defeat him. Namiki just stays quiet before saying that. If Shinji really had the ability to make his allies underestimate others, maybe it could even be called the Orochi Subjugation Squad. The damage would have increased considerably. The provocation irritated Shinji, who used his gravity punishment skill to press Mimiki's body against the ground. He replied that even though they were childhood friends, Namaki was still a real failure who thought he could even give advice. His stats and unique skills were really trash. Namaki was just a weak, rank D fool who thought he was important for having a higher level. Therefore, Shinji wanted him to stop acting so familiar, because that always infuriated him. Now, they had real proof that a level 100 person was just for show and didn't actually have any power. Normally, when someone reached level 100, it was expected that they were not only advanced, but also use high-rank magic and skills. In his case, however, it stopped the moment he hit the intermediate stage, while he leveled up easily compared to other explorers. Unfortunately, his stats like attack, defense, and all the others had stopped where they were ever since he reached level 30. Even now, Namaki was stuck at level 100, but he didn't understand why or even how to fix it. He wished he could stand side by side with the girl he admired and who made him become an explorer. That was why he became an explorer. That make you wondered what was the point of leveling up, if it would make him stronger, even if there were differences in each individual. This was going too far. What he was going through now was a bit too much. Faced with this scene, Shinji could only laugh at his pathetic attempts. He used to rely so much on that hope, and now was relieved to the point of thinking he was something great. Shinji asked what the person and Miki admired would say when seeing him in such a sad and fragile state. He shouldn't have even noticed, because Himawari didn't even care about him, and for some reason that really made him angry. While holding Namiki down, Shinji approached and grabbed the bag Namiki was using. The protagonist told him to give it back, but Shinji knew exactly what it was, because it was a gift and Miki had received from someone he admired. Shinji asked if he really intended to keep that with him, a lucky charm, given by someone who was worried about how much of a weakling he was. Then he noticed that the charm seemed to have been repaired. Even after being torn, he could see that Namiki valued it too much, but even so, Shinji just tore it apart and even put it in his mouth, since he wouldn't need it anymore because it was completely useless. After spitting it out, Shinji even stomped on it, which made Namiki even angrier than before. But Shinji continued to restrain him with his gravity skill. Shinji laughed because Namiki didn't even need to get so angry. He worked so hard because he wanted the person he admired to recognize him, but he was still completely pathetic. Namiki hadn't gotten even a little bit stronger since then, and was still a huge embarrassment. Maybe it was time for him to give up once and for all and just die. Namiki struggled with his arm and reached his hand towards Shinji to make him stop moving. Shinji laughed at his attempt to resist and asked if he even knew that if a death occurred inside the dungeon, cause of death would be investigated according to the regulations. And so the Explorer Association would continue to do its job, and the body wouldn't even end up being searched for afterward. That is how things worked in this world. He could simply be reported as someone who got in the way, to protect Shinji from a monster, before dying, and as a memory of that Shinji, his dear childhood friend, would take his bag back and also his charm. Maybe something like that. He personally intended to deliver the bag to the person Namaki admired, and wondered what kind of face Himawari would make when she found out what happened to the person she helped. While she would certainly be sad, Shinji would take the opportunity to hug her and comfort her after learning about his death, and he would even tell him where he was there with her, so she didn't need to cry over that death, and he would comfort her. Now Miki told him to stop provoking like that, but he continued using high-gravity punishment to keep holding him down. Not only that, but he also slammed him hard against the ground using his powers. And I asked what Namiki thought of his highest level magic. It was incredibly powerful. It would make Namiki turn into nothing but scraps of paper, with no way to recover. And he continued using high-gravity punishment again and again. Namiki's body kept getting injured and bleeding more and more, to the point that the girls around started worrying about the ground cracking open. But Shinji laughed because he truly was a bit fragile, and so he decided to leave, abandoning Namiki in that state. Shinji said goodbye, saying that he would take good care of Himawari later. And Namiki furiously yelled for him to stop, but Shinji just said goodbye again, without any remorse for what he had done, while Namiki was left behind cursing his own weakness. and the ground broke thanks to Shinji's powers, and the protagonist fell, plummeting from a great height. At this rate, Himawari would really end up staying by Shinji's side. Namiki wanted to have the power to defeat him, but at this point he couldn't do anything. He wanted to become much stronger, but there was nothing he could do. That's when the analysis skill was activated by the system, and the system calculated the final impact within 20 seconds. There was no way to avoid the death from a fall. That was about to happen. Since Namaki predicted the probability of death, it was obviously 100%, therefore, it was impossible to survive the fall. Namaki wondered why his completely useless skill suddenly activated. A long time ago, we tried to reduce the gap in strength between him and Himawari, but now this skill showed up and it was all he had gotten. After everything, a skill specialized only in analysis was totally useless in combat. Namiki knew he had no value to the point where he felt frustrated, because others always threw that in his face. The system sent even more messages than before, confirming his death and analyzing multiple times, until his unique skill evolved. There was a unique death count, and his stats started to reset, granting 1 million bonus experience points, and Namiki finally leveled up again. When Namiki woke up, he got up with a startled scream, then sighed when he realized he was alive. Despite falling from a great height, he was shocked when he saw where he had fallen from. Normally, he should have died, but there he was. He wondered what was going on. Namaki was sure that before he died, it was Shinji who caused everything and only fueled his fury. He was used to being mocked up to this point, but this was going too far. That's when Namaki looked to the side and found his lucky charm. It was true now. He had to hurry to meet Himawari and also Shinji before things got even worse. But in the current state, he wouldn't be able to defeat him. Namiki looked around, realizing he was somewhere else. He couldn't afford to be pessimistic now. First, he needed to figure out how to escape from there. Now that he thought about it, the current situation was strange. Namiki didn't feel any pain, and there weren't even scars or injuries on his body. So he turned to check his stats. They had actually doubled compared to when he was before dying. There was no sign of pain or anything like that. Then he was startled when he saw that his level had risen to 101. He never thought he could surpass this level. It seemed that 100 wasn't his limit. Even so, it only made Namiki wonder if those were really his stats. Maybe he was somehow cursed. While considering that idea, he did notice that a monster was hiding and coming to attack him from behind. Now Mickey dodged to the side in time, grabbed his sword and slashed it, but now that he looked more carefully, it was clear that it wasn't just an ordinary low-rank monster. His body felt strangely light, and his sword felt like part of his body for some reason. When he moved now, Mickey wondered what was that sudden pain he was feeling, and questioned if he had hurt himself somewhere. Suddenly, the protagonist jumped in fright when a sound reached his ears. It sounded like a dog's roar, and he wondered what kind of floor this was, where he had ended up after falling. If it were the second floor, then there would be kobolds. If it were the third floor, the roars would belong to the Shadow Wolf. But it didn't take long for Namiki to be caught off guard when he heard an explosion behind him. When he turned around, he found something he certainly didn't expect. It was a gigantic, two-headed beast spitting fire. It was an Orthrus. Namiki knew it was dangerous enough to cause fatalities, even among rank B adventurers. Namiki ended up being pushed into a dead end, and he realized that Shinji had made him fall into such a ridiculously high place. It had to be his childhood friend. But there was one precious thing that Namiki had to protect. He could never forgive anyone who tried to deceive or hurt him or her. He couldn't leave them alone like this. That's why he was going to survive and get out of there quickly to prevent such a thing from happening. As the monster prepared to attack, the Mickey activated his physical enhancement skill, and it activated immediately. He then started performing his physical reinforcement, which granted him resistance to fire, water, wind, light, darkness, and light as attributes. Namiki felt that if those stats were really his and true, maybe he would be able to fight properly this time. Then he charged at his opponent to fight him well. At the same time, a girl with bat wings walked silently, just like Himawari, who turned around looking a bit worried about Namiki. And meanwhile, he activated his body fortification again. This greatly reduced the damage from the fire attribute. Protagonist had reached level 101. His stats had truly doubled since then. If that wasn't the case, then the flames wouldn't have been blocked with his skill. To this extent, Nemiki used his appraisal skill, and the system started calculating with a timer. And Nemiki wondered when exactly he had reached level 100. He wondered if it was because of his effort, courage, and determination. But there had to be even more factors involved. But above anything else, Nemiki could now win against stronger opponents, or at least endure long enough. More than anyone else. This was all because Nemiki had always been observing monsters. When he was weak, 20 seconds passed. And monsters always had some behavior patterns and some obvious weaknesses. Just by observing, Nemiki could predict his opponent's movements. And in the case of that monster, patience wouldn't help it. Nemiki saw it charging toward him to attack. So be prepared, and swung his sword at the monster. And in 36 seconds it was finished. The countdown ended. And Nemiki wondered if he had really done it that quickly. It's a really stubborn monster. It made him sigh the timing to attack and endure each movement. Even though Nemiki had only used the fortification skill, he actually became stronger than expected. It was quite useful during a fight like this. It was pretty simple at first, but this time things were different from usual. This time with his stats doubled. Nemaki didn't even need to use body fortification to enhance his stats overall, but if it weren't for the resistance his powers created, he definitely would have been burned to death. Then suddenly Nemaki saw the monster charging at him again with a loud, ferocious roar. It didn't seem to have died. Even after that attack, Nemaki could have almost been swallowed, but he took advantage of the close distance and pierced the monster through its mouth to defeat it. The system finally confirmed that the target was taken down, and Nemiki's level started to increase because of that. If he had hesitated, he surely would have died, which was expected from a terrifying monster like Orthrus. Thus he also acquired a new skill. But suddenly the system started to glitch, and Nemaki wondered what kind of skill that was. The skill in question was Insight, which allowed him to see the true nature of the target. He was using it on Nemaki, wondered what exactly this was. It seemed like the type of skill that beginner explorers acquired at the start if that was the case. Nemaki wondered why he hadn't acquired it earlier, but at least he could try using it now. Activating the Insight skill. If it weren't for the Orthrus's level, it almost seemed like somehow he managed to surpass. From that point on, Shinji had said that he was the only one who would have died. So it was likely that he told Hima everything that had happened during this time. Nemaki had to hurry if that were the case. But he could still feel that strange pain from earlier, and he wondered what exactly that was. At that moment, the previous research yielded results, and he realized that things were actually getting worse. The fact that the Arthurus he had fought was just a juvenile was surprising, but if that was the case, then it must be that he had fallen to the 5th floor. If Nemiki kept running downstream, that he might find a safe area. But that didn't stop him from encountering monsters along the way. When he turned around, he felt a strong murderous intent coming from behind him, and he wondered if it had come from that entrance. Nemaki realized he was really in trouble. He ended up being caught by that monster at this rate. Suddenly, when he noticed, he found himself falling into a trap. Nemaki couldn't believe that things had turned out like this. He used his calculation skill to check the situation, and the system accurately predicted the arrival of each arrow coming toward him with those numbers. He needed to hurry. That's when the system started giving an alert that a high-level monster was rapidly approaching. He then began reviewing with the Divine Oracle, and Nemiki wondered what exactly had happened. For so many alerts to appear at the same time, the enemy was being analyzed and was at a distance of 120 meters. It was a beast-type monster with a fire attribute. The target's level and all details were being calculated, and the required experience to acquire next was 1,500,000. The calculations concluded that more experience was necessary. Another 3 minutes passed. During this time, the appraisal points began, and Nemiki wondered what all of this was. So suddenly, as a huge amount of analytical information rushed into his head, at once that's when he turned, in time to hear a growl coming from another monster that appeared furiously behind him. It fired a powerful fire attack, and forced Namiki to jump into the water, and he managed to recover successfully, earning more points because of it. He was shocked to the point of realizing that something like this could actually happen. After using his analysis, he could see that this was an adult arthrosis. As expected, the juvenile form had some kind of strange power, and Namiki dodged, just in time to avoid being swallowed by the monster a second time. The more he avoided each attack, the more points he was able to accumulate because of it. But he knew that at this rate, he would surely be killed. It had been difficult just a moment ago. And Namiki checked that he had received another points analysis. He didn't even know what those appraisal points were. With his current stats, it was clear that he couldn't defeat that monster. Namaki wondered what he should do. At this pace, he would end up dying from exhaustion, and the system said that 3 minutes had passed. The appraisal points doubled, ending with a divine sense. And so several more points were added along the skills. The number of notifications left Namaki stunned, until finally the final points settled, based on rank or reflecting his combat experience. He gained 1,500,000 points thanks to that, and Namaki suddenly leveled up by 50 levels. The Mickey couldn't understand anything, because his points had suddenly increased so much. He hadn't even defeated the Orthrus yet, and the experience points seemed bugged. But it wasn't something he could stop to care about. Now he needed to deal with this somehow. Suddenly Laugh echoed, warning that this was only happening because he killed that child's cub. And now his mother was furious and attacking him nonstop. Namiki wondered where that voice was suddenly coming from. Inside his mind, it was the voice of a woman who was invading his mind, saying that it was still entirely Namiki's fault and couldn't have been avoided. He turned around asking who exactly she was, and the girl mentioned that she was sleepy, so he could do his best alone. Now Namiki wondered what exactly this woman was, who appeared out of nowhere, and how she was able to interfere with his mind. Even though he was confused, he decided not to focus too much on those things. Namiki had to do something about the current situation. He activated his divine speed. The appraisal points were being calculated and Namiki froze, wondering what this was that was happening again beyond his control, when he noticed even more points were added. Those flames being fired were dangerous. Even with Namaki's body fortification, he probably wouldn't be able to withstand what was happening. Moreover, at his current level, he would end up melting instantly if he were hit directly by those flames. So he decided to invoke his water magic to attack his opponent, firing a stream against it without much effort. He hit the monster, and the system calculated more point additions, as Namaki wondered if intermediate magic had always been this powerful. To this extent, his attack was even stronger and better than expected. And above all, something that looked like a dragon emerged from the magic circle. He really couldn't understand it. But for now, he decided to just use it to survive what he was going through. Namaki continued using his water magic against his opponent, until finally, his attack hit the monster squarely and pierced right through it. It was a critical attack, and his appraisal points were added, until his body fell to the ground when it was killed. Even so, it seemed like it was still breathing, even when it should have been dead. There was an incredible vitality in that body. But with that, Namiki decided to deliver his final attack using his sword, and his target was finally declared annihilated. He received even more points after each analysis that was made, to the point of calculating that he had reached rank A. The combat experience was reflected and optimized even further, so he received a massive amount of points, totaling 9 million. Namiki increased 300 levels thanks to that, and acquired advanced magic for all 4 of his attributes. After that achievement now, Namiki could understand. The appraisal skill that he once thought was useless was being used to analyze objects and even time itself to the maximum. And after evolving into divine analysis, it meant that now he could do anything. The experience points required for his own level were always being calculated. It was also highly efficient. The methods to acquire it and his appraisal points were all successfully granted, based on the level difference between him and his enemies, and his actions during battle. The experience points were gained, and influenced by everything he could analyze. As a result, a god-rank skill that allowed great acquisition of experience points was acquired. So, this absurd amount of experience was meant to be able to acquire around 100 points. It truly wasn't luck that got him to level 100. This was something he couldn't have understood if he hadn't acquired Divine Appraisal. But thanks to that, he could surpass his limits and go even further. The Mickey could become even stronger than before. Now, he could have some chance of stopping Shinji with his own hands. That's when he stood up and realized he had to fight even more, to raise his levels higher than ever before. It still wasn't enough against monsters that powerful. Surviving down there required an absurd amount of power, and defeating Shinji also wouldn't be possible. Yet Namiki was determined to become even stronger than before. To become stronger, he remembered Himawari and held his lucky charm anyway. For now, he would figure out how to better use his appraisal skill. Outside the dungeon, he also intended to defeat Shinji, and the girl who was merely watching smiled when she saw her little dog being killed by him, using his power to kill. It was something she had to admit took some courage to do. It seemed like he had truly awakened it at last. Meanwhile, Himawari was at home when she heard the news report. It said that something would be announced directly from the Explorer Association. Earlier that morning on the first floor of the dungeon, the ranked D Explorer Mamiki had passed away. Himawari dropped her coffee mug instantly in surprise, unable to believe what she was hearing directly from the news. According to what was discovered by Shinji Yukimura, Namaki's body was severely damaged, and only his bag was recovered with his personal belongings. Himawari thought that if she had only stopped him from becoming an explorer, things might have turned out differently, and wondered if he had really died. She wiped her tears just as she heard someone at her door. When she approached, she saw that it was Shinji. Came to greet her after some time since they had last seen each other. Himawari looked at him and questioned what exactly he wanted, and he replied that he never thought he would end up passing by there, but it was a good opportunity. Then he showed Namaki's bag, saying that he wanted to be able to give it to her, and Himawari recognized that it was indeed his belonging. She quickly decided to open the door to check it, bringing a smile to Shinji's face, because it was time to move things at the pace he wanted. Himawari opened the door quickly to take the bag, and Shinji smiled before using his gravity skill to pull her inside the house and closed the door behind him. He laughed, asking what was the problem, and asked if she was feeling all right, laughing at her as she was being pinned to the floor. I'm worried asked what exactly he was trying to do, realizing that she couldn't even use her strength to fight back. Shinji approached asking if she was okay, and she slapped his hand away, which made him chuckle, as expected from an explorer who survived the 12th floor. This was the willpower that went beyond any ordinary woman. She began to stand up even under the pressure of his gravity powers. And Shinji asked if she was still as shocked by Namiki's death as she seemed. I thought. She started to believe there was definitely something wrong with him, and he noticed once again that she was really resistant to hypnosis, making it difficult for him. But even so, Shinji knew that now she was an easy target. Himura asked why he was doing all this so suddenly, and Shinji asked if she didn't understand, stomping on Namiki's bag, saying he had been watching his childhood friend all this time. The guy who wasn't strong at all, but was still completely kind, was always ignoring someone like him. And Namiki started to feel even happier as time passed, which was why he couldn't forgive him now for the things he had done. Shinji knew he had to make Namiki suffer even more than before, so that he would fall into true despair. But now it was gone for good, and Shinji laughed because of it, commenting on how much he loved being able to enjoy other people's sadness. Thanks to this, I'm worried. With tears in her eyes, admitted that he really was a piece of trash, who completely lost his mind at this point. But Shinji just smiled and used his gravitation skill again to press her against the floor. Calling him trash and weird was really quite rude. That's because he was perfectly normal. While Himawari was a talented rank A and a beautiful person, there were many people who admired her. So she shouldn't disappoint those people by using such vulgar language. Namiki might be feeling quite sad now in his afterlife, if he were seeing those things right now. Himawari couldn't understand why he needed to go this far, just because of someone like Namiki, and he sighed tired of this whole story, and decided to use even more of his gravitation skill than before. Meanwhile, Namaki was looking back when he found another monster appearing. His detection failed to discover the real name of that thing. He heard the voice of the woman again, saying that humans always did those things so quickly, tried to expose everything about their opponents. The last time she suffered because of it. So she ended up preparing in advance this time. Last time Nimiki wondered if that monster he confronted should have faced another explorer before him. A water element dragon that could speak the human language was something new, and he couldn't even get enough information about it. She mentioned that she was just trying to communicate with Namiki and asked what was the point of him staying quiet. Even during this moment, a one-sided conversation wouldn't help anything. It was necessary to be strong and taciturn, but at the same time dignified and imposing, despite that Namiki responded that actually. It felt like she was the type who was always talking nonstop. That made her question whether he was mocking her. And Namiki hesitated even while agreeing with her words. And so she felt that for a moment she understood his position. Now she was irritated and got close enough that she could kill him, since he was just a mere human. The woman said that just because he defeated her dog didn't mean he could get so full of himself. After all now, Mickey decided to use his body fortification, thinking that he should at least look strong. On the other hand, he should still have a chance to win. And even so, if he could just make good use of his divine appraisal. In a place like this, he should be able to become more powerful quickly. That was why he couldn't hesitate anymore. He needed to get out of there quickly, before returning to the place where Shinji was. Namiki prepared to attack. And first he thought he should create a blind spot using fire, and then hit directly with a slash. He uses fire attack magic to try to land a direct hit, while the monster just watched the gathering of his powers. Of interest, Namiki uses magic called Frantic Dance of Flames, the great phoenix inside the dungeon that would cause chaos. Despite trying to attack, the beast dodged and laughed because, after all, this was his territory and it knew it better than anyone else. The reason he was able to defeat the dog earlier was because of his power as payment. It would take control of his magic, and canceling it was done easily. Namiki realized too late that he had never heard of anything like this. Magic control, and the girl laughed, noticing that even humans shouldn't know about it. Annihilation class magic was something new, and Namiki wondered if she could even read his thoughts. But Annihilation class meant that her magic was of the highest rank he could have ever known. And she replied that technically there were 2 ranks. Even above Advance, there was also the Mythical class, which was between the highest and Annihilation. Any way to be able to cancel his magic. A special class of magic was very necessary. Namiki realized that she was teaching him carefully despite everything, and she responded that even with his current level of power, he couldn't even be a threat. Therefore, if he wanted to compete with her, he at least needed a power of 4,000 or more to be worthy of that. Namiki was shocked that a level 4,000 could even exist. Those numbers were insane even for him. Based on his current power level, he activated his status and checked it, because his level was at 452 with all his stats at rank B. And Mickey also realized that his stats were increasing, to the point where he could even defeat an advanced Orthrus. But this meant that she was on a completely different level, and Namaki wondered who exactly she was. Namaki decided to stop and think, observing the things he could make work. And she said that the last time she suffered because of this, so she needed to make sure to take precautions. It all started with Orochi. In recent years, Orochi had been surpassing the dungeons and reaching the cities. It was a dragon-type monster of the highest rank, possessing terrifying strength and an impressive firepower. To this point, and even ranked explorers ended up being pressured by this, to the point that the Explorer Association began, calling for skilled people to Fornia Rashi's subjugation team to highlight the entire situation. During the battle, some weaknesses of Rashi were discovered, and they changed their tactics to a more offensive approach. And even so, they still couldn't defeat it in the end. There was a high possibility that the person speaking now was actually Orochi, if that were really the case. And Mickey couldn't even defeat it with his current strength, and he wondered what he should do to create an opening and escape. He had to think about how to maintain a conversation with her. During that same time, and Mickey asked her why she was trying to communicate with someone like him. A beginner, and she replied that the reason was simply pure curiosity. She wondered how a human without strength like him had managed to get to the point of stealing her power. And the other reason for her communication was solely that. She wanted to know about that. And suddenly a hand emerged from within a magic circle. The hand offered an item. And Namaki wondered why she had something like that, and asked where she suddenly got it from. She replied that it was from human belongings, when she brandished several of her tails. It just happened that she took those things back. Namaki wondered if this meant there were others like her, walking around causing that much trouble. And from the way she spoke, he could tell that the owner of that arm, that passed through the magic circle, was also the main body of Orochi. Orochi mentioned that he had gone quiet again, and asked if he wasn't saying anything because he didn't know, or simply because he didn't want to. Yamaki thought that level 4000 was the power required to stand. Against this, at least, that's what she said. Right now, he couldn't defeat Orochi in this situation, but with that skill, he decided to use the god. Test skill was activated and his target's level was analyzed, trying to find any strategy that was within his reach. Now Mickey realized that he could use this to his advantage, to try to get out of that situation. The system continued analyzing the level of his target, and it concluded that the amount of experience required to reach the next level was 25 million points. Orochi was surprised when Namaki charged at her, using his powers in the same way. Ripping her hand from inside the magic circle, he managed to destroy her right arm, making her scream in pain. As the system said that the appraisal was complete, he managed to deal damage to a disaster rank creature, and thus acquire the 25 million points, leveling up even further to 2,200. He also acquired a new skill. And Namaki was shocked when he saw the level he had reached. Those numbers were completely absurd. It was so broken it was hard to even believe, but he managed to acquire a new skill, called Ultra Physical Enhancement. Namaki could believe in the optimized action that was suggested by the God test, and so decided to cut the arm after the analysis was completed. It was truly a terrifying power. The power of her main body was at this level. Orochi said that this human had really managed it. She was truly furious, thinking that he had chosen to go for a surprise attack and managed to cause this damage to her. Namaki apologized, but said he couldn't waste his time there with her. There was something more important. He had to stop Shinji. He knew that an explorer like Himawari, Ranka, was quite powerful on her own. There was no way someone like Shinji could defeat her, but so he had bad feelings about it. And therefore Namaki wanted to run to Himawari as quickly as possible. And Roshi recognized that he must be deeply busy in his thoughts. This wasn't the kind of thing one could just sit and watch. Even more so after he cut her arm off, and she decides that she would kill him herself once and for all. Orochi tells her tales to keep him busy, until she personally goes to him, and she fires an attack at Namaki, who barely dodges it. The protagonist realizes that it wasn't just Orochi's main body, but also that the monster body in front of him was this huge. The pressure coming from her was terrifying. Even though Namiki's level had increased significantly, he wasn't sure if he could defeat such an opponent. He performs another God test and begins to check the situation, acquiring the evaluation information. And Namaki decides to use his physical fortification. Namaki charges at the opponent, even though he's in great pain. But he's simply thrown far away without any difficulty. Namaki was launched far and got hurt to the point of dropping his sword. He couldn't understand what kind of sharp pain he was feeling now. Because of that, he couldn't put any strength into his attack. Things were only getting worse. And the system decides to calculate his action. When he saw the result, Namaki froze in surprise and wonders if it meant he could actually defeat him. After all, the system calculated for him to use his ultra physical fortification. And even while confused, he decides he wouldn't hesitate. There was no time for that. Namaki uses the ability anyway, and Orochi is surprised. His body was on fire this time. He felt like he could lose control at any moment and charges at Orochi, grabbing his sword and slicing the monster's body in half. The system agrees that his target was properly eliminated, thanks to his efforts, and confirms the completion of the god. Test points were added again. The damage done to his enemy was fully accounted for, as well as all the things he had achieved in total. Aranka was evaluated, the combat experience was reflected, and he gained even more experience points. It was almost 11 million experience points in total, and Namaki's levels increased by 600 at once. Meanwhile, Shinji made a call saying that he was going to transport now, and that they should send someone immediately. Looking at Himawari's condition on the ground, he acquired 3 new abilities. Among them were mental mapping, weakness detection, and improvement in his insight. Then Mickey felt his head spinning. It could be some effect of the ultra-physical fortification he used earlier. He ends up coughing blood while collapsing to the ground in pain. Suddenly, that immense pain started to overwhelm him, and he wonders what was happening. The Mickey opens his status and realizes that his body was in terrible condition, and the alcohol concentration in his blood had risen to unbelievable levels. No wonder his head was spinning so much. With his current condition, it was better not to keep using the maximum fortification of his body. Like that, looking back, Namiki saw something coming out from inside the monster's body and moving away, and he realizes it was some kind of strange gas. That meant that even if that monster was dead, it could still be alive after all this. If that's the case, the gas was heading far away toward the main body, and he remembers Orochi saying that he would need at least level 4,000 to win. Now Mickey couldn't defeat the main body with his current strength. Before all that, he had to go back and stop. Shinji needed to stop that guy somehow, and he notices that something had fallen. It was his cell phone that was dropped earlier. It was that thing Rashi was holding and sent through the magic circle, and he decides to at least pick it up. Now Mickey starts running and uses his mental mapping ability, but that he could discover something shocking. That's because the place he was in before wasn't the 5th floor, but actually the 20th floor. It was the deepest and furthest that any explorer had managed to go before, especially since Namiki had only reached the 12th floor. He never expected to fall that far, dropping from the 1st to the 20th floor after Shinji's attack. Using his god test, Namaki verified that he was indeed now moving through the 18th floor, and his target was moving on the 25th floor. The estimated contact was in 45 minutes, but soon Morochi's main body would catch up to him. The system calculates the required level to defeat the target, and the experience points needed for that started to be measured. Since then, Namiki needed to figure out a way to get through this. Well, he received an alert, warning of multiple high-level monsters detected ahead. When he saw it, some monsters appeared in front of him, and Namiki realizes that he had no time for any of this. For now, he had no choice but to keep increasing his levels as quickly as possible. Thus, he uses his abilities to learn more about the enemy ahead, which was new, detecting the weaknesses it might have. Namiki would observe, refine his analytical senses, and explore each of its weaknesses to be able to strike it precisely. He managed to defeat 3 Baphomet, and his evaluation points increased even more, successfully completing the god test. Namiki had his levels increased again, and the pain in his body worsened, once more only getting even worse than before. When he turned around, he found a 3-headed monster approaching, and Namiki uses his water magic attack. He landed his attack perfectly and managed to kill the Cerberus with a fast move. That was also a critical hit, but it was only one of its heads because as it was still alive, and Namiki decides that his focus would be to kill enemies and push forward no matter what happens. He intended to perfect his god test ability until it was finally complete, and Namiki has his points added. All the analyses were added, and as he gained a total of 70,000 experience points altogether, and so he managed to acquire enough experience to reach level 3,000, as well as a new skill called Double Slash. Namiki is surprised, because receiving a sword technique was indeed rare. But then he realized that the Baphomet monsters weren't done yet. They were the same as before, but maybe they had called even more reinforcements than before. And again, the monsters speak even without understanding anything. Namiki feels that his stamina was at its limit, but remembering Himawari, he knew he couldn't give up. If he fell there, it would be the end. That was when he felt something even bigger approaching, and turned around wondering what exactly it was, because the huge thing that appeared behind him wasn't just a monster, but an enormous creature, terrifying red eyes. It attacked Namiki directly. pushing him back as he wondered why there were golems down there. Maybe the monsters were helping each other. Then several Baphomet used magic circles to try to hit the protagonist. Namiki had no time to react and almost got hit directly, thanks to the sudden rain of attacks. He was grabbed by the leg while falling, pulled by a magic circle, and realized he had to hurry to do something. The god test starts rebooting. A strategy process begins to be formulated while being trapped in the magic circle. Several Baphomet gather to attack him again. Then Mickey sees that the calculations were completed and the action optimized. So he uses his double slash attack to hit his opponents. He kills the monsters that approached, while the others were still attacking from a distance. And Mickey kept attacking over and over. And his evaluation points kept being applied and accumulating. As expected, activating his abilities still left him tired and in a lot of pain. That was when the golem slowly approached from behind to attack him. Meanwhile, Jaime was trapped in some room. She woke up after a long time, and Shinji asks if she finally woke up. He laughs because in the end, his charm only worked at the beginning. He was impressed because her willpower resisted for so long. It was easier when there were more women present. And Himawari questions what exactly he was trying to do. He grabs her by the face and replies that he really didn't like her. Those eyes of hers were the eyes of someone who believed that Namaki was still alive. It was hard to understand, because she told the weak Namaki that he couldn't be worthy of becoming an explorer, and she also abandoned him. Jaime replies that it wasn't true because Namaki, after a certain incident, became obsessed with becoming stronger, and then he started risking his life. That's why she told him to stop becoming an explorer before he ended up getting hurt. Still, Jaime says that it was his choice to continue on his path. As an explorer, he was living his life on his own, and she believed that Namiki wouldn't have died so easily. That's why she wanted to believe that he should still be alive. Somewhere meanwhile, Namiki was facing the golem using his water magic, and manages to destroy the golem's body, once again completing the god test. He receives 9 million experience points, and levels up even more than before. Namiki didn't want to die, yet even in the circumstances, he still wanted to return to Himawari, despite all the difficulties. The system announces that he has reached level 600, and thanks to this achievement, Namiki's reconstruction would be executed immediately. He wonders what exactly reconstruction meant, without knowing what it actually was. His body felt heavy, as if it was falling apart, like it would break into several pieces. When he woke up from that pain, he saw that even more monsters were around him. The Baphomet were gathered, speaking nonsense. Namiki then realizes that there was a barrier around him and wonders what exactly it was. The god test restarts, and his points are calculated. Namiki tries to grab his sword, just as the Baphomet's attacks are aimed at him. He runs to try to avoid the attacks coming his way, and Namiki successfully manages to neutralize the attacks aimed at him. Once again, the Baphomet hadn't stopped yet, and their attacks continued. So he uses his double slash to clash magic against magic, without stopping again. The neutralization continues being added as points to mark him. 30 minutes have passed since then, and the points kept accumulating. Now Mickey was getting exhausted after so much defending. At this rate, his body would end up breaking from the strain. Because of the barrier, he couldn't aim direct attacks at the monsters, like he had done until now. His body was screaming in pain this whole time, and he felt like he was starting to fail at dodging the enemy attacks. He was sure that he was in serious trouble. But finally the gauntlet test was completed, beginning to calculate all the points. In total, he received another 8 million points, and Namiki increased his level again. In just a few minutes, he reached level 3,800, and he remembers again Orochi's words about needing to reach level 4,000. Only 200 levels were left for him to reach the minimum necessary. Once he did, Namiki would undergo his reconstruction. He still didn't know what that reconstruction meant, and Orochi acknowledges that he looked exhausted. Now, after fighting so much, Namiki turned just in time to realize that he was in front of Orochi's original body. After all, he had made her wait, and she states that he was facing her main body. Now, that was Orochi. He wonders if her body was some kind of humanoid, She was tired because all this time she had been moving. Now Mickey wonders how she managed to catch up with him. Across 5 floors within just a few minutes of difference. She crosses the barrier and approaches. It seemed like he had caused a huge mess along the way while walking. Now Mickey realizes that out of all the enemies so far, he suddenly now noticed that all those monsters were under her command. Orochi asked if he was even listening to her speak, and Namaki doesn't understand anything, especially because he was focused on her right arm. He knew that he had cut off that arm, but suddenly she had it again. And Namaki wonders if she could regenerate. Orochi notices what he was focusing on and says that it hurt a little, but having a piece of herself taken wasn't a big deal. Naki had inflicted a wound on her. She would love to kill Namiki right now, but before that, she wanted him to return that thing that belonged to her. Namiki asks what that thing was, and Orochi gets irritated because he was pretending to be an idiot. He should know what she was talking about. He grabbed the thing that had fallen, and Namiki realizes that she was talking about the cell phone he picked up from the ground, and Mickey asks if she would let him go if he returned the item he took. And Orochi replies that that's not how things work. She acknowledged that he was much stronger now than before, but he was still not at the right level to defeat her. Namiki realizes that even so, he still had no chance against her. After all, he still needed 200 more levels to be able to face her. Before that, however, his body would end up breaking at the pace he was feeling. So much pain and incapacity. Orochi says that if he doesn't return it, she would kill him, and the system starts restarting the god test again. Namiki had no more time to lose. It was now or never. The system calculates the required experience and optimizes his actions. He uses his double slash at Orochi, defends herself, but it still deals a light wound on her cheek, and she prepares to attack again. Orochi says that's such a mere scratch. Using his special attack was pathetic. Meanwhile, Namaki's experience increases by 13 million and his levels rise. He reaches 4,000 levels and the reconstruction starts immediately. That's when a huge explosion happens and Orochi is startled, not knowing what was happening. When he saw Namaki had his physique change thanks to the evolution, she wonders what kind of pressure was coming from him. Namaki didn't feel pain, but somehow his perception of things was even greater than normal. Orochi commands her monsters to attack, because this was the chance they had been waiting for, and all of them fire attacks at him. Now, Mickey simply jumps and passes through the attacks, as if it were nothing, and Orochi is startled, because he was indeed strong and had become even faster. It didn't take long for him to neutralize all the attacks, coming his way once again. At this point, he should have been completely overwhelmed. But that's when Namiki used the god test again, and the analysis was done quickly. The information about his enemy was calculated. Orochi was a disaster-class monster with 12 humans in her troops. His new ability allows him to land without worrying, even when new attacks come his way. Namiki charged for the monsters, and Orochi was once again impressed because in the blink of an eye, his speed increased even further. He killed all the monsters that appeared in front of him without difficulty and demonstrated his double slash ability, which had evolved to its peak. His attacks simply doubled, killing the monsters and appeared in front of him without giving them any chance to fight back. The information started being modified in his data system and updated, now that Namiki could face Orochi in a one-on-one fight without worrying. She still says that she could see several openings in his movements, especially in his back, where she decides to take advantage and attack. But Orochi's shot merely passed over his shoulder because he dodged and quickly moved to the side. Right after annoyed, Orochi clicked her tongue and prepared to attack again, with a water bullet, a shot that chased after him. But then she witnessed the moment when the Mickey appeared in several places at once, splitting into multiple versions of himself. Caught off guard by his new ability, Orochi ended up being attacked from multiple possible directions, and that's how Namiki defeated her. Sighing when everything was over, the system confirmed that the target was successfully silenced. He stopped to breathe and realized that he had really managed to finish them all by himself. Looking at the state of the place behind him, however, it only made him wonder even more than before what exactly he was becoming. After entering that floor, the feeling of making the slashes, He could vaguely remember everything he did, but he couldn't fully recall it. Even though Orochi was a monster, his opponent was still a creature of enormous rank. It was unbearable even to look at her in that state. At least the crisis was avoided, thanks to the awakening of his abilities. Now, Namiki would have to escape quickly from there while he still could. Suddenly a voice rises. Laughing loudly, she never thought she would be defeated so easily. Not even in her dreams when the protagonist turned around. He ended up facing an unbelievable sight. The monster's body was glowing, and she was still speaking to him, surprised. Namiki wonders if that thing was truly immortal or something like that. And she laughed because she underestimated him, even while using such a brutal ability. It seemed it would be better to finish him off with everyone together. It had been a long time since she had seen someone turn the tables. Against her, the system alerts that a magical energy material was suddenly surpassing the threat levels of his target. Namiki witnessed her body moving to reassemble itself, while she was laughing at his reaction. It seemed her creatures were also ready for battle, and she released them, forcing him to cover his eyes from the explosion of light coming toward him when he turned around. The protagonist ended up seeing an unbelievable scene, because now Orochi was surrounded by several other monsters around her. He could hardly believe that a monster like that was inside her, this entire time until now. The demon caresses one of her monsters, mentioning that he must be so surprised that he couldn't even scream, and she laughs because it was no wonder that he was shocked. No one would have imagined something like this happening. After everything, that was because Namiki had forced her to get serious, and she couldn't hold back anymore. Now that they had reached this point, Orochi commands her tails to charge her opponent, and the monsters fly toward the protagonist instantly. Faced with that, he narrowly dodges the attack that came his way. Using his god test once again, the system recognizes that he was updating the information about his opponent, including her main body with its 6 tails. The abilities of each one were different and were below the power of the main body. But even so, they were powerful enough to make Namek dodge the entire time he ran, while the number of those monsters continued to be superior to his, running from one side to the other. Even after evolving, Namaki wasn't strong enough to deal with all these things by himself. In the end, even after being so pressured, he ends up being bitten by one of the monsters and falls. His body is thrown far away, and Namaki loses his sword during the escape, getting up irritated after everything. When the monsters were coordinated like this, there was no way to counter the situation like this. It was confirmed that there was a significant blood loss from the protagonist's body. After receiving the bite on his right shoulder, Orochi approaches, asking what happened to his speed and power from before. Suddenly, it seemed like he had lost it all. Maybe they could take the opportunity and finish the situation, as it was now. And so she commands her monsters to finish him once and for all. He wonders how he could defeat that woman from before, now that he was in an even worse situation than at the beginning. He was questioning what kind of action he should take. There had to be some kind of clue for him to use and move. That feeling of entering the zone and conquering everything with his power was something he suddenly lost. Going from one side to the other. If you use that ability again, maybe things could have been different. But at the same time, it could end up only getting him more and more hurt as a result. Using the God test, it was possible to calculate the optimized actions as a result of those actions. And Namiki decided to do it the same way. Power came from inside him, ready to explode, and cause a huge mess around him and inside his own body. When the monster charged at him this time, Namiki managed to dodge and charge at them at the same moment. Holding his sword, he swung it against the monster's teeth, which were powerful enough not to fall. Even now, he could feel a powerful and impressive strength. He was being overwhelmed in every sense of the word by that power. In the end, even the awakening of that strength resulted in nothing. Namiki was being overwhelmed in several ways. His body screamed in pain, and his head was spinning in place like a top. When he looked down, he was even hit directly by the monster's fire. He was sent flying by several consecutive attacks from each of the monsters, right after without stopping, to the point of finally being so pressured that the system said the damage reduction ability was activated, but it still didn't contain all the damage. It was close enough because he could have died by a very narrow margin, avoiding a fatal attack just shortly before falling. At that, Orochi screams at him, asking how much longer he intended to keep fooling around and playing dumb, commanding her monsters to finish him. Namiki keeps wondering what he could do, if there was any strategy he could take and use to his advantage. Then the demon herself points, asking what he was doing just standing there. And the protagonist realizes there was one monster in particular. Doing nothing, it seemed like it was just licking the blood on its hand. Not just it, but the other monsters also became curious about that. Hiroichi doesn't understand what was suddenly happening. There was something wrong with all the monsters. When she realized it, it seemed like all the monsters ended up getting drunk. After ingesting the blood from the protagonist's body, they suddenly stopped being threatening and became strangely cute, to the point that even Orochi didn't know what to do. And they all had that stupid look in their eyes. That's when the protagonist stopped, to understand what really happened. That's because the fortification of his body, that he used a little while ago, caused the alcohol level in his body to rise. So he gave the impression of being drunk. This caused him to be induced into a berserker state. Now Namiki could understand the details of the situation, because the monsters got drunk with just a little of his blood, just like in the legend of Yamada. No Orochi and their love for alcoholic drinks. With that body seam, he could use this more times into his advantage. He smiles and Arachne keeps screaming her monsters to do something, and at least move for once. She wanted to make those idiot monsters stop acting that way. But there was nothing she could do. Now, they should remember what happened the previous time. And even so, they were acting like idiots. At the most important moment, when Orochi turned around, she saw that Namaki was drawing blood from his own arm, to be able to drink his own blood. If a monsters wanted that liquid so much, because it must have been tasty, then he offers for the monsters to have it. She was shocked, asking what exactly he was planning to do. And then Namiki activates his enhanced physical fortification ability. Then Namiki says, for those creatures who love alcohol to all come at once, so they can fight and finish it. The monsters charge at him, and Namiki feels that the amount of blood should be enough for him to continue the fight in his favor. As soon as the first monster attacks him, he gets drunk again from the blood and stops moving just as expected. But before the protagonist could take advantage of that, his body ends up suffering from that pain, and he flinches at that. Another creature charged at him, and Namiki barely dodged, climbing up its scales and avoiding it. Then he calls the creatures again so they can drink more of his blood. Even more than before, all the monsters end up in that drunken state. And Namiki asks if they were at least enjoying it. It seemed the creatures became distracted. He couldn't waste the opportunity to use that to his advantage. That's when Arashi appeared and stabbed him from behind, warning that he was overthinking and hesitating when it mattered most, even though she was smiling. The protagonist turned around knowing she would be there, stating that she was quite predictable. That's because a little earlier, she did the same thing and attacked him from behind when he least expected it. And now Namiki managed to read her movements and wait for the attack. That also surprised her, questioning what exactly he was trying to do. And he turns around to grab her because he knew she wanted this too. He would make her drink his blood the same way. Orochi rides, asking him to stop with that. But in the end, this was the result of things. She ended up getting drunk and still asked him to stop. And finally, Namiki lets her go and steps back. Orochi gets up, while he knew that it must be a pretty bad situation for her, now that she was in this state. Even though she was drunk, she was still threatening him. And Namiki felt that he was close to losing his consciousness. Now was the perfect opportunity to take advantage of this. So he intended to fight to the end and survive, even feeling that he could lose consciousness at any moment. He intended to slash her, and Araki tells the monsters to move, not understanding how they could still be standing there in that state. Instead, they just sigh and lie down, staying completely still there. And she questions what exactly they were doing. Meanwhile, Mickey uses his physical enhancement ability once more to be able to attack his opponent. She turns around worried, knowing that at this rate, they would all end up truly dying this time. But he doesn't even hesitate and attacks all the monsters with his sword, killing all of them again. and thus Namiki increases his levels once more. He reaches level 6,000 meanwhile. Himawari was still spending all that time locked in the room when she saw someone open the door. A girl appeared in there, and Himawari questions why she was there, knowing that her name was Ella. Oi replies that it had been a long time since they last saw each other. She came because of a message from Shinji, who asked her to visit. Himawari asks if by any chance Oi had fallen for Shinji's charms, when the other girl questions what she meant by that. Himawari gets irritated and raises her voice. She wanted to know if it was true, that she was being manipulated by Shinji, and tries to make her get out of that. That Noelle asked her to stop bad-mouthing Shinji like that, because he saved her and was a good person to her. That's why she states again that Namiki was dead, when she was in shock kindly. Both her body and mind were comforted by Shinji. It became even clearer to Himawari that Aoi's mind was clouded by his hypnosis, and Aoi talks about how Namiki completely ignored her during that time. Therefore, Aoi had always been jealous of Himawari for a long time, which left Himawari not knowing what to say, while the other girl complains that she hated both her and Namiki deeply for the things they did. Himawari doesn't understand anything. After all, they used to all get along and be very close. She cries because she wanted to be close to Aoi, and always saw her as her younger sister when they were friends. That's when Shinji appears, acknowledging that such a serious conversation ended up being interrupted by him, and apologizes for that. Oi approaches happily when she sees that he arrived, and he holds her by the face, mentioning that she should get along very well with Himawari. She apologizes because she just got a little emotional during the conversation. Then Shinji spoke to Himawari, saying she should be kind to her lovely little sister just like he is. But Himawari yells at Shinji, questioning why he was using his hypnosis on her like that, and doing so many horrible things. He replies that it was all her fault to begin with, all because she was always too stubborn to give in. His charm never worked on Himawari, and she asks what exactly he was thinking by doing such things. Shinji replies that it was nothing. He was simply contacted by the Explorer Association the other day, and they had asked him to join the extermination team against Orochi. So he wanted to make both Aoi and Himawari part of his team. Therefore, he intended to make her cooperate with him. That was why Aoi was there and held her with a sense of possession. Aoi complains because his touch made her feel ticklish, irritating Himawari when she saw that disgusting scene. Therefore, Shinji smiles, stating that Himawari would become part of his team, whether she wanted to or not, because he certainly wouldn't leave Aoi alone. Meanwhile, Namaki's remaining vitality was only 5%. His current status was dying. Even so, he felt that he was truly alive. But the time remaining until his death was 137 seconds. He still hadn't died somehow, because he could still feel the warmth of human skin touching him after everything, and it was pleasant. He still didn't know that his head was resting on Rashi's lap, and the system alerts that there were 90 seconds until his death. The demon herself knew that as well, and Miki still felt that he should have decapitated them. But Orochi says it was a shame. But there was still something left. They were entities made of 8 parts, and could not die unless all of them were defeated. The protagonist complains because she was a monster, and Orochi feels bad again for hearing that. It was rude to be called that. But above all, she says that Namaki surprised them. They thought they were about to be defeated once and for all, and she smiles, saying they would accept him. The time remaining until the protagonist's death was only 30 seconds, but he himself had no idea what she was talking about, which makes her nervous, because she didn't want to keep repeating the same words again. 10 seconds until Namiki's death. Orochi feels that things were really getting bad. This time, she either hurry and starts to take something out from within a magic circle, and the protagonist asks what she planned to do. Even so, she just smiles because she intended to do it immediately, and stabs Namiki's chest with that dagger. Orochi offers her nightly greetings to her master, and at that the system begins divine observation. There was an increase in synchronization between Namiki and Orochi. System checks this connection, and increases it even further between them. This way, he could acquire new abilities, and his stats increased drastically, thanks to the new connection. When the protagonist woke up, he saw that one of the monsters from before was by his side, and he sits up with a start surprised. but he realizes that the creature was just looking at him, without doing anything. Nemiki tries to look for his sword, but doesn't find it, even after all that. His sword had disappeared, and instead of touching it, he ended up touching something he shouldn't have, which made him realize that Orochi was right there beside him. That makes him startled again, wondering what had happened, and not understand and how his enemy ended up sleeping next to him. But above all, he himself was confused because he was naked, not even knowing what to say about such a weird situation. To begin with, so, instead of saying anything, Nemiki gets up to grab his things and leave as quickly as possible. That's when one of the monsters approaches and cuddles against him, which makes him whisper to stop that right now. Thanks to that, Orochi wakes up complaining about all the noise they were making. And at the same time, she sees that scene in front of her. She becomes very happy to see that her master had woken up. A little later, he finds some new clothes to wear, and Orochi compliments him because those clothes suited him, even though they were clothes she stole from some humans. Inside the dungeon, even so, they were garments with magical protection that would serve her master. So Namiki asked her to explain this situation better. He didn't understand why he was still alive, even knowing that he shouldn't have died after all that battle. Before then, the demon realizes late that she hadn't explained anything to him yet. So the two sit at a table to drink and talk. Orochi says it was a contract they had just made, because he had died once, but was able to synchronize their bodies with each other. Before that happened, so now, the protagonist could realize that the previous memory wasn't false. She had indeed pierced his chest, given that you should be in the same state as her now, and he wonders if he ended up turning into a monster. She denies his questions, explaining that her master was merely connected to her from now on, and Namaki asks what that was supposed to mean. At that moment, Orochi reflects on how she could show it better, and asked him to close his eyes and command her to lend her eyes, even though he didn't fully understand. And Miki agreed and asked what her real name was. Finally, the girl realizes that she had never properly introduced herself. Despite always being called Orochi, her real name was actually Hachi, and so he does as she asked, closing his eyes and commanding her to lend him her eyes. When he realized that the protagonist was having conflicting feelings, and Hachi asks how it felt to be able to see himself from her perspective, he agrees that it was kind of weird actually, but he could better understand what she was trying to say earlier. Basically, Nemiki realized that he could now use Hachi's powers, and the girl laughed in agreement, since he understood quickly. The protagonist's stats should have increased drastically since then, and so she decides she would explain the details to him better. Meanwhile, the Explorer Association was in a conference room, in a meeting on the 3rd floor. The leader of the subjugation squad, a rank B explorer, Ishihara Katsuhiko, says that he gathered everyone there to discuss the subjugation of Orochi. Recently, there had been an increase in attacks in the dungeons of the cities, where Orochi was somehow involved. They were merely able to contain Orochi's tales and help the association manage the cities in the chaos left behind. Even with the police and investigators getting involved, the damage caused to the cities was significant, enough that the cities had to begin rebuilding. At this point, they knew that Orochi had 6 different forms, and they knew her weaknesses due to the most recent battle. According to Ayaka Kayagaku, the receptionist, and the weakness in question was a high concentration of alcohol. In previous battles, after managing to inject alcohol into the target, they were able to deal significant damage. They understood why monsters could get drunk just like humans. It seemed that the legend of Yamato no Orochi was actually true. Ishihara says they were cooperating with a bigger company during this time, as they needed a large concentration of alcohol. Therefore, they would start preparations immediately, and the location they chose for this was the 4th floor of the dungeon. Thus, they intended to draw Orochi's attention there, and then get her drunk enough so they could move in and finish everything. Ayaka states that everyone had to unite to fight and to defeat Orochi. They had someone who'd be in charge of handling the front line. Suddenly, a person appeared in the room. exclaiming that they should leave everything to him. It was Shinji who entered with several other girls gathered. Ishihara knew who he was, but didn't want to be rude, yet still asks if he could really handle this whole situation. He lashed in response, stating that they could rest assured, because he and his team were prepared and could handle the situation. Ishihara was then surprised, because not only was Shinji there with a good team, but even Himawari herself had joined him. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Hachi was moving with the protagonist through a water sphere inside the river. He was surprised because magic was always so convenient. Now he could understand how he had always been losing the battles until now. After all, she had also reached him quickly when they were several floors apart. And now, he knew it was because she traveled through the water to get there. Hachi laughed because she knew it was something impressive. It was all thanks to being able to use magic this way. But it was exhausting. It was always easier because she could transform into a dragon. Mickey asks if she couldn't do the same thing. Now as Hachi ends up hesitating, the protagonist feels like he was being inconsiderate with the question, and she confirms it because she didn't want to talk about it. Now, even though Nemiki found it strange, she decides to just change the subject altogether, since she would explain the reason why they were rushing out of the dungeon. Now that's when she started calling him Mr. Nemiki, which made him feel strange since he wasn't used to that. And Hachi mentions that of course she would call him that. After all, he'd become her master from that point on. Even with him protesting, she decides to keep questioning, since he was in a hurry, and it seemed like something urgent was happening. With that, Nemiki explains that they were running like that because they needed to save Himawari from Shinji's dirty plans. Ne makes Hachi ask if that girl was his lover or something like that, and he denies it, saying she was just someone he admired. Upon hearing that, the demon laughs and turns away, without explaining the reason for her smile. But Nemiki was more focused on the fact that he could face Shinji in his current state. Meanwhile, in the large square of the dungeon on the 4th floor, several people had gathered with their supplies. The explorers had brought down several barrels into the 4th floor, including explorers like Himawari who were working there. Ishihara approaches asking if she had a moment so they could talk, and Himawari turns around agreeing. He thanks her for joining to contribute to Orochi's subjugation, alongside all of them this time. It was just that. It was quite difficult for a genius girl to make her explorer debut while still in high school. Himawari had even become a rank explorer in record time and left a mark on many people with her actions. Ayaka warns that he was letting his fanaticism slip into his words, and the leader apologizes for that anyway. He asks Jaime why she joined Shinji's group, since he had heard that Shinji was someone with a bad reputation. The girl hesitates to answer, remembering the threats made by Shinji about what would happen if she left Eva behind. It had made Himawari witness all the humiliation caused, and now she was aware that she couldn't abandon her. When she falls silent, Ishihara asks if something was wrong, and Himawari denies it, explaining that she just had known Shinji for a while. Mentally, she promises that she would save Aoi above anything else, glancing sideways at the explorer surrounded by girls, including Aloy, who was still under his hypnosis. If only Nemiki were there, things could have been different. And Shinji gives an evil smile when he notices he's being watched. He knew he was hurting him aware by acting like that. But even so, she didn't intend to falter. In any case, she needed to find an opening to break the hypnosis that had been cast with his charm. Then suddenly someone shows up, saying that something like Orochi had been detected on its way there, and everyone was gathered on the 4th floor in a large square. 15 humanoid forms were detected by the explorers. Nemiki himself noticed this, and asked Hachi to stop moving for a moment, even though she didn't understand. He commanded it anyway. Hachi stopped the journey, and the protagonist complains because she suddenly brake hard, to which Orochi responds that it was him who asked her to do it. Protagonist says that it seemed like there were some explorers nearby, and they were targeting Hachi, but she herself didn't understand what was happening, and he shows her the cell phone, which she remembers was one of her belongings. Hachi sees on the screen that they seem to be her children. It was a news report about the 8th determination of the subjugation group that was about to happen soon. Finally, she understands that they were enemies who had been gathered there, and she asks what they should do about it. The protagonist replies that first they could check their movements, and he uses the god's test to make it work. However, when he used his ability with the system, he was surprised, because he saw that Himawari and Shinji were walking together. In fact, it seemed that they had told her that Namiki should be dead by now, and she was supposed to believe it, just as expected still. He wonders what happened between them during this time, and Hashi also acknowledges this. After all, she knew that it was Shinji who made Namiki go through a terrible experience. It didn't seem very popular. Beside him was the girl of his master admired, which makes her laugh because she knew something good had happened. Meanwhile, Shinji tells him aware that they were interested with working on the front line, and she should step up to do a good job next to him. Aoi lets out a light laugh, asking her not to embarrass Shinji with her careless actions. That makes Shinji himself laugh because it was rude, but Aoi doesn't care, laughing and apologizing to Himawari, who remained silent. She wanted to be able to break his charm, but she wasn't any good at that kind of thing. She needed to keep an eye on Aoi. In the meantime, it seemed like they would end up fighting Orochi, and that could be the opportunity she was waiting for. Suddenly, they stop when they hear a scream from the side. Everyone turns, and a man uses binoculars, pointing for Ayashihara to see the situation, because a massive heat source had been detected. The leader approaches, asking if it was Arashi they were seeing, but what appeared was a huge number of monsters, with a person running in front. It seemed that a woman was being hunted. Ayashihara warns the others about it, saying the safety of that girl should be the top priority. They should help the woman, while leaving Orochi in the hands of Shinji's team. And all the explorers agree with those words. He himself agrees with the leader's orders, even though he thinks he's a real pain for always saying annoying things. Shinji tells his team to do their best for the group, and they agree, rushing toward the creatures. The girls start using their powers to fight, and Shinji smiles, asking the genius beauty Himawari herself to attack as well. There was nothing she could do to avoid it, and she ended up being forced to agree to his request, despite her reluctance. Now she would go after Roki to fulfill the mission. When the hunted woman fell to the ground, saying she was scared, Himawari appeared running, saying it was dangerous, and uses her sword to try to kill the monster. Her sword sends the monster flying, and she asked the woman if she was okay, to which she replies yes, since she had just been saved. The other explorers run to help the woman, saying they would leave the monsters to Himawari while they take care of her. The first step of her plan was a true success. The woman Hachi now recognizes that this was indeed the lady Namiki admired. Not bad at all. Meanwhile, the woman passes by Shinji as well, and he realizes she really was a total bombshell. He planned to use his charm on her later. Meanwhile, Hachi mentally grumbles that Shinji really was the type who had no class at all. Laughing mentally, she eagerly hoped they could move on sooner, now that they were all together. Besides, she needed to stop using her tails as a distraction. And Himawari notices that the monster she was fighting suddenly veered away from her. In fact, it started flying straight toward Shinji and the other girls, who were using their powers, leaving them tense, unsure of what to do in that situation. Shinji turns around, scared, and saw the monster flying toward him at the same time. When he turned to run, he saw a huge explosion happen. He couldn't understand why that creature was chasing only him like that. Therefore, he would use his gravity powers to seal its movements and activates his skill immediately. However, he is caught by surprise because his ability was nullified the moment he used it. It was Hachi's doing, who laughed mentally for using her destructive magic in validation. The human monsters to pressure the explorer. Shinji falls to the ground, questioning what his team was doing, yelling at the girls to hurry up and protect him. Suffering under hypnosis, they agree immediately. But before they can do anything, Himawari steps in front. She takes the creature's attack head-on and falls to the ground. And Hachi whispers, shocked, because she was an idiot for getting hurt by throwing herself in front, and she knew for sure that her master would end up getting angry. Because of this, Himawari fell to the ground, while OWI looked at her without understanding why. The explorer turns and answers that it was simply because both OWI and Namiki had been her disciples, and she had to protect them. Even so, OWI's mind ends up suffering again from Shinji's hypnosis. He tells her to stop using her powers like that. Hamura gets worried seeing the girl riding like that, with the explorer's filth acting against her. Instead, Shinji orders his senior to hurry up and do something about Orochi. Otherwise, LW would end up suffering the consequences. I'm worried shouts for him to stop that, while Hachi sighs, realizing it was really dangerous, and she would end up having to leave the rest to him. As she passes the information to Namiki, she summons another tail, worrying the explorers once again, until suddenly someone kills them with several slashes. Even Himawari froze in surprise when she saw the protagonist approaching, and she recognized him immediately. A little stunned, she asks if it was really him, and Amaki smiles back at her, then ran toward her when he saw her collapse to the ground. Himawari says she's fine, which brings a sigh of relief from him, but she still wanted to know why he was there. And above all, she was confused, because the atmosphere around Mamiki had changed a lot. After all, she saw that he defeated Orochi in a single move, and was shocked by what she witnessed. Saying Namiki says that many things had happened since then, and asks what she herself was doing there with that. Himawari says that she wanted to retrieve his belongings that had been left behind, then looks in the direction of Shinji, who is still on the ground. The Mickey also stares at him, after finally meeting again after some time. And Shinji gets up after taking a moment to remember him. Shocked, he questions why he was there, how he could still be alive even after being in there for so long. Protagonist understands his confusion after being killed by him. Many things had happened inside the dungeon. Himawari turns around surprised when she hears this. She had always thought that situation was very suspicious, but as expected, something was indeed wrong with Shinji. The explorer laughs when he sees that she was starting to accuse him of strange things, even though he had done nothing. Pointing at Namiki, he asks what exactly he wanted by coming there, when he was just a level 100 weakling. Even if he had defeated Enrashi by pure luck, he couldn't just go around thinking he was powerful because of something like that. In the distance, Hachi gets irritated because they were being rude to her master. However, the protagonist himself is the one who speaks up. Instead, his aura flares up and scares the other explorers around him. Even Shinji freezes in surprise, not understanding what was going on. That terrifying pressure, Ayaka freezes upon seeing such power. It was a noticeable breakthrough compared to everything they had seen until today. Not believing it, she wonders what had happened to his stats to awaken such power in just a few days. That was because her analysis only showed that he was at level 6,000, with various abilities and stats that couldn't even be measured. The two explorers stare at each other for a while, until Namiki starts approaching, scaring Shinji, who didn't understand what was wrong with this guy. Ollie asked if he was okay, since she literally saw him wet himself in fear, which makes Shinji furious, yelling at her to shut up. He slaps the girl in the face, and Heimira gets worried about her. But Namiki is the one truly surprised, because he didn't even recognize AWA. Standing up, Shinji recovers, laughing about how sad it was that, after all this time, they reunite, and he doesn't even recognize her. Girl on the ground remains silent while listening to this, and the protagonist questions that he was really using his hypnosis on her all this time. This makes the explorer laugh, telling him to check if that was really true, since he was also trying to sing with his idol. Namiki looks at Himawari in surprise, and she says that she thought she could just deal with it after hearing about his death. But it was truly a pity because her strategy didn't work, and she ended up falling into his manipulations. As expected from a rank adventurer, his powers weren't enough to control her, but he didn't mind that much. Therefore, instead of using Himawari, decided to take advantage of her younger sister and controlled her with his powers. Always starts being pressured again by his powers, while pleading for him to stop, which only enrages Namiki. The girl begs for them both to stop right there, because it was for Shinji's own good, then charges at them to attack and make them disappear. The protagonist defends against her relentless attacks, with her promising to kill him with all the fury of her heart. He himself is surprised by the admirable strength she was displaying. Must have all been coming from AWA. She didn't even seem like herself anymore, which makes Himura prepare to face Shinji directly as well. The explorer laughs as he realizes she was trying to stand in his way, and warns her not to do that because it was a terrible idea. Then Mickey tries to get Owen to wake up, but she only screams back at him to shut up, because he never even noticed her to begin with. Hachi comments on how her master seemed pretty busy now, which catches him by surprise. But she knew exactly what to do now. Therefore, she jumps in as well to help them out a bit. It was her turn to get involved in the fight. At that moment, Shinji is surprised to see that the woman from before suddenly jumped close. And she used a destruction magic called Extra Gift, and her powers hid away directly after the attack. She froze, regaining her consciousness and becoming confused about what was happening. Then the protagonist asks if she was really returning to normal. She looks surprised in his direction. At least Nemiki feels relieved, because she broke free from Shinji's manipulation. And the girl agrees, getting up and grabbing her sword again. She wanted to say something important to him, which makes Hachi chuckle as she approaches, recognizing that she was back to normal thanks to her powers. Nemiki realizes that she used her destruction magic to destroy the enchantment magic used on her. As Hachi agrees, Shinji asks what exactly just happened there, not understanding anything. But everyone ignores him because Hachi was just approaching her master, since she had done her best. We could just praise her properly later. Then Mickey complains because she was always clinging to him, but she was satisfied enough since it was a decent promise. Oyai watches this and asks who exactly this beautiful girl was. But before he could explain, she mentions that if it were Himawari, she thought she would have to give up. That's when Aoi's power exploded. And even Namiki was startled by what she was doing so suddenly. Despite his surprise, Aoi didn't care at all about it, because she had always admired Namiki from the beginning, ever since she was in school. Back in that time, when someone almost attacked him. But he went after the guy and saved her. She had been interested in him ever since he entered the dojo. Namiki always took care of her, and even when she was discouraged with training. He encouraged her, however. He was always looking at Himawari with those same eyes. When she heard that he had died, she felt a great emptiness inside herself afterward. But even so, when she saw him with Hachi, she screamed, questioning why it had to be someone like her. Orochi was almost hit head-on, but Namiki jumped in front to defend her from Aloy's rage-filled attack. Aloy would never forgive him for that, which made Shinji laugh, because his enchantment power always activated and intensified people's negative emotions. It made emotions grow even more intensely, to the point of becoming a true curse of the heart. That only made Namiki even angrier. Although the explorer kept laughing in that superior and arrogant way, maybe it was time to be a little more violent. His power acted on Aoi, who begs him to stop, and the protagonist realizes he would end up hurting her if he fought back in the situation. He wonders what he should do until Himawari suddenly charges at Shinji, attacking him and breaking the accessory he was using. He was caught off guard by what had just happened and jumped back, further away than before, while Himawari prepares to attack again. He asks her to stop now because it was enough. Shinji raises his voice, saying she was just a woman, and he was a man who refused to give up on anything. Then he fires his enchantment ability again, but this time with even more intensity than before. Al was immediately grabbed by this power, worrying the other two, while Shinji orders her to give everything and become as completely, seeing that scene while he laughed. And Mickey questions what he was trying to do by hurting the girl that much. Although he tries to approach to help her, he can't do anything, and Shinji poisons her with hatred, envy, sadness, and even shame that were being built inside her, that his power ended up escaping this way. Now he wanted to take all that from her, so he himself could become stronger. Under Shinji's hypnosis, Oi agrees to offer what she had to him, and his power enters her body, shocking him worry with the horrifying scene. Hachi comments on how that explorer was truly the worst kind of person that existed. A disgusting man who used her negative emotions to make that power his own, and he was slowly intending to break Aoi. Shinji obviously felt the power flowing into him, quite pleased with himself. Himawari was the first to charge at him to stop this situation. At the same moment, he counters using his gravity power. Her movements stop instantly, leaving him stunned by such power. Both were a rank, but Shinji was superior to her in strength. Even so, she had no intention of falling. Haimwari needed to bring him down with her attacks, and save Alway at all costs. Beside them, Shinji enjoys the perfect situation. All I ended up in that state all because of Himawari, and he suggests that she should kneel and beg. Now his gravity powers continue to take effect, growing even stronger than before. When Namiki intervenes and prevents her from getting hurt, he tells Shinji to stop this, because he insulted Himawari and was causing pain to Aloy, taking advantage of her feelings for his own benefit. He was hurting the people he cared about, so he would never forgive him for such things. But Shinji couldn't care less. After all, Namaki was pretending to be some kind of hero to say these things. He was always the good guy, being a huge hypocrite that made him sick. Shinji's power continues to pressure the protagonist, to the point of worrying him aware. And he pushes harder, trying to make him kneel. But even with his upgraded version of the skill, Shinji noticed it wasn't working against Namiki, and the protagonist asks what kind of things he had been doing until now. That Shinji ignores him, and just unleashes even more of his power onto him. His gravity power was upgraded to the enhanced version, and then into extreme high gravity, putting all his power onto the opponent. Still no damage was caused, which shocked Shinji for some reason. His gravity power had no effect even when he was giving it his all. Hachi walks her master with pride, telling him to just give up already, because none of this would have any effect. Furious Shinji screams and decides to attack Alway's train away. Hayam Weary shouts for him to stop, but the explorer decides he'll take something important from Namiki, right in front of him. But little did he expect that the protagonist himself had already passed by him and slashed him with his sword. Calling him a villain, Shinji screamed when he realized he was wounded, echoed throughout the floor, writhing in pain as he saw the state of his hand. Hachi and the other explorers just watched everything, without moving or making any attempt to help him in the slightest. Shinji turns around to ask why Namiki did such a thing, and above all how it was possible for him to take such an action when he was just level 100. The protagonist stepped forward and told him he was level 6,000 now, catching Shinji by surprise. When grabbed by the collar, Namiki just dropped him on the ground before speaking to Hachi, asking her to use healing magic on him. And she agrees because she couldn't really refuse that. They spoke mentally and his request was accepted. Time passes and all the injured explorers were taken to be healed, including the girls who had been under Shinji's control all this time. Allah called out to Himawari, crying and trying to apologize for the things that happened, and for everything she did and said. Himawari holds her hand with a smile, asking her to rest and not worry about those things now. She asked the same of Namiki, who agrees because everything will be fine after some time. Always kept apologizing as they take her to a safer place. The group just watches as the injured are taken away, and Namiki asked Himawari if she was okay, and the girl agrees, looking down. She turns around to check if he was okay, letting out a relieved smile since she saw that Namiki was safe. Now that reminded him of the smile he saw when he was younger. He was his inspiration, the person he always admired and cheered for since he was young. The scene makes Hachi laugh because they were really in a good mood. Now, that's when suddenly Ishihara appears running over to talk. He thanks Namiki because he saved everyone from the Irachi attacks a little earlier, which made him a bit nervous. Ishihara states that of the 6 Orochi bodies, they managed to defeat 3, and that was a big step for humanity. And above all, they were able to capture Shinji thanks to that. He just wanted to contact the Explorer Association. They decided to return to the base since they were on the 4th floor. And all the explorers praised Namiki because they defeated Orochi so easily. Honestly, it gave him chills. And even the protagonist didn't know what to say. In the face of all that flattery, that's when Hachi spoke to him mentally, saying she purposely got rid of her tails, and he shouldn't forget to offer her a reward later. And he agrees that he would do that, just as Ishihara asks for his name again. And Namiki introduces himself to the squad leader. It made everyone remember, because his name was quite famous for being that explorer who reached level 100 for the first time. The others whisper among themselves, because they heard that leveling up that much was difficult. They didn't even know how a weakling like him managed it. But if he cheated to level up, it was still weird that he had become so powerful to the point of defeating Orochi. That Himawari interrupts the conversation, and Ishihara acknowledges they were saying rude things, but even so they thank him for the help. That day, they could offer something in the name of the subjugation team. Namiki was surprised to hear about a reward when he heard Hachi's voice, asking that they wanted that special thing. And he realizes she was referring to the barrels of alcohol, which makes him smile, understanding that in the end, those monsters were really all addicted to it. Later, Namiki finally leaves the dungeon and stretches. It had been a long time since he was inside it. Hachi praises him because he had been working hard for a long time, but the person he admired didn't go with them. Himawari stayed behind to help the subjugation team clean the area. The demon asks if that was really okay, and he agrees that's because she was the type of person who was always helping others and wouldn't change. And he wanted to become someone who could support her on that journey. That's when Inaka approached to talk, asking the protagonist if he had a bit of time to spare. The next day, Hachi and he went to the Explorer Association together. In the dungeon city in the business district, the two were walking together when Arashi comments to her master that she was stuck in a mobile game and couldn't pass the stage. When Namiki saw it, he explained that she just had to recharge or wait a day to make it work. That caught her by surprise, because she didn't even know what recharge meant. And he answers that she had to get money again. She didn't quite understand the terms, and asked what the so-called pay gacha was. So Namiki explains it better for her to understand. She had to pay money to get a random character or item in the game. When she did that, she could get very powerful characters, but sometimes she might only get something kind of bad, since it was a random system. Either way, there were many ways to get achievements in the game. Hachi was outraged, because if you don't spend a lot of money, you can't get stronger and enjoy the game. And he was forced to agree because gacha games were always like that. She worries because she didn't have that much money. Namiki considers the situation and mentions that Hachi could get money by opening an account, but there were other ways to do that too. Thus, she learns that she should work to get money. She could even become an explorer like him. But right now, Hachi seemed a little too conspicuous, even when disguised with a big hood over her body. Even though the protagonist didn't care about people's stares in the previous battle, Hachi and he actively worked together with the subjugation group. There were several witnesses of her true form. The word spread quickly, and the media was ready to catch a scoop at any moment. Namaki knew that if she remained unprepared, the rumors about her true identity could spread and become dangerous for her. There were also the damages caused to the city. They couldn't let anyone discover that she was the true disaster level. Orochi suddenly. Hachi yelled at the protagonist because he hadn't been listening to her for a while, and he apologizes for getting lost in his thoughts. She asked if he was worrying again, like when they first met. She then laughs because she decided to become an adventurer too, which catches Namiki by surprise. He even tries to explain that in her current state, things would be complicated. He wondered whether the people at the association could even accept her, and Hachi replies that with his power now, maybe he could make everyone listen to him. He replies that wasn't the point, which makes Orochi smile since she intended to make a lot of money and get many things in the gacha. On the way, Namiki mentions how she had been playing the same thing since they got back the previous day, which makes her complain because she didn't want to stop. Along the way, some people were watching the pair from the top of a building, but no one said anything. And so they continued toward the association headquarters. When they arrived, Ayaka smiles at the two because she had been waiting for his arrival, and Namiki introduces Hachi as one of his friends. The girl asks if she couldn't call herself a servant, which makes him ask her to stop provoking like that through thoughts. Then Ayaka laughs because she could understand, and they walk further into the building. The Mickey asks the reason why they were called that day. She says she would explain things in the office and guides them to the elevator. Because the other day, she had approached to talk to the protagonist. She introduced herself as one of the people from the Explorer Association. During the Orochi subjugation, she saw that the two of them really did very well. The protagonist can't even properly respond, but Ayaka continues speaking. When she reported the two of them to the association, the senior manager said he wanted to meet him. Namiki was shocked by this, and Ayaka continued saying that in addition to the two of them, Himawari and also Ishihara were called. Even tomorrow would be fine, but she would appreciate it if they accompanied her to headquarters. Still that day, it didn't take long for them to head to headquarters. Or Namiki wondered why the manager wanted to talk to him, and Hachi speaks to him mentally, asking if he noticed something strange. As the higher they went, the more she felt an immense power approaching. Namiki agrees. It seemed like they had been watched for a long time until now, and she advises to be careful. The group arrived at the 48th floor, where Ayaka guided them to a door and entered asking for permission, where the man inside the manager turned to meet them. So the video ends here if you don't want to miss the next part. Activate the notification bell and see you next time on Tab's channel.